Hello, welcome to the Rankers. I'm Kyle Wright, and with me is Stuart McPhee. How are you, Stuart?
Carl wrote, "You son of a bitch, I'm great. How are you, sir?"
Yes, I'm really well, thank you. We thought we'd just do a small bonus episode here and just discuss some of the things that have happened since our previous episode, where we discussed the possibilities of what could happen with the rumored Oasis reunion, which is now in absolute full swing. What are your thoughts so far on what's happened?
Well, certainly a lot of people have made a lot of money, and by a lot of people, I mean Noel and Liam Gallagher. I
Yeah,
think certainly the demand, the rollout strategy has been very, very smart in terms of
yeah, agree.
um, getting a pulse check of the interest, laying the groundwork, and then adding shows. So we saw that in the UK and Europe, then with North America, and now Australia, where there's now 5 shows in total to date. That nothing to say that if there's not enough demand there, that there's not a third Sydney show. So I think the rollout has been really good. I think to let people in on a little secret, we were talking about this a couple of days ago on an episode that didn't air, but we had both noted the lack of any sort of interviews about it. They've been very much keeping stum, which I think is deliberate. And by keeping stum, I mean still some sidebar conversations in tweets out there. But for the most part, they're very much let the ticket sales do the talking. And there's still a lot that we don't really know, like who is actually going to be in the band, whether there is legitimately new material. There seem to be some strange cryptic tweets from Liam about who may or may not be special guests in terms of the support acts. I think the only thing that's absolutely known official is band Cage the Elephant's going to do the US tour. But apart from that, there's nothing concrete. What about yourself? How have you seen it all roll out?
Just before I comment, I think Cast and Richard Ashcroft have been announced for the UK supports.
Okay, so that's been official, and that was what I was alluding to. Liam had tweeted something to that effect, but
Mm.
yeah, I wasn't quite sure
I'm
if he was
I'm
just.
not sure it's yeah, I'm not sure it's 100% official, but I think it's
Yep,
pretty close to what will happen.
yep,
Yeah, I agree with you regarding the no interviews. Actually, was expecting an interview pretty much straight away, considering that they had got together for a photo shoot. There's actual rumors that that may have been photoshopped, but I think
yep,
they actually did get in a room together.
yep.
And I thought, it made sense, photo shoot, interview, to be released at some point. But I actually think the radio silence from both of them, apart from obviously Liam's Twitter or X activity, whatever you call it these days, has really been a smart move, and just let the announcement of the shows, let the ticket sales dictate how many shows there's going to be and where those shows will be. And I think it's just almost a masterclass in, if any, like particularly if like an REM or something was to do to do a reunion tour or something like that. This is how to do it.
Yeah.
Let the fans who have been dying to see these bands at least one more time.
Mm.
Let them make the decision with their feet, and don't go out and say something that might affect that from happening.
Yeah.
Probably REM's probably a bad comparison, given that they seem to get on pretty well together.
Mm.
Whereas the Gallagher brothers can be quite volatile. So I think it's been a smart strategy. I think the interviews will come, given that I think there's a documentary as part of this whole package that will come, but I think we'll have to wait a while till we get one.
Yeah, and given that the gigs aren't until around this time next year, there's not a lot more, particularly if there's still work to be done. So it is, whether you sort of see it as a sign of maturity for the band and growth for the band, particularly a band that lived everyone lived vicariously through through the tabloid coverage of the 90s, and when music press, particularly with NME and Q, and that was at its peak, um, it was all just content for them. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it'll be part of whatever their control of a doco looks like, and it'll be something like a Zane Lowe podcast, um, or something of that ilk, that will then uh, reach its biggest audience, over a UK magazine style TV show, or even a Radio One interview. It's bound to be in this day and age a Zane Lowe style level of podcast.
What will be interesting is that when the interview does take place, will it be them together in the interview, or will it'll just be Noel or perhaps Liam, or by themselves?
Yeah, well,
That'd be interesting.
and they could claim it's a divide and conquer strategy, and Liam's on one, Noel's on another, but who really knows? I think, given that everyone is, I reckon, just keen to see them both on stage belting out the hits, having that as the only sort of driving force for people who hold this interest. Some with a lesser degree than bums like you and I, who are just there for rightly just a pure nostalgia trip for them, not having that muddied by tit for tat spats in the press is probably the wise move.
Yep, absolutely. What's really excited me about this is that uh, as great of a band as they were, probably getting to that 2009 stage, they were probably fading as a musical force. And if they were to do a tour of Australia at that time period, you're probably not looking at Marvel a stadium and a core stadium. You're looking at much smaller venues.
Yep.
They're probably only doing one night, two at the most, and being lucky to sell those out. I think it's a definite case of absence making the heart grow fonder, and obviously the ticket sales. The UK, there was 1.4 million tickets available and 14 million people trying to get them.
Yeah.
Myself included, all around the world, and then more. Them selling out America and playing in big stadiums is, I don't think they ever did that. So the fact that they can do that now just shows that, that I think that nostalgia, that I think even maybe not so much Oasis, but I think people are just craving bands and big bands, because they're few and far between now. Foo Fighters look like they're on a hiatus. Coldplay have announced that they've only got 2 albums left. The bigger bands that can sell out those stadiums, they're getting older. They're now legacy acts, and so I think it's been good for them to, and they've done it the right way. And there's no way they're selling out these stadiums without that 15-year break.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, look, it'll be interesting without going too much into the personal. Both you and I have been able to secure tickets at various locales around the world, and so I think there was obviously some real concern that to begin with it was just going to be UK, and then maybe just North America, which of course feeds into how they've done this rollout has been quite smart in terms of keeping the enticement there. And I've missed out on this, I've missed out on that. Oh, great! They're now playing where I live, so that certainly helps. So no, look, really looking forward to it. There's obviously a whole other year to go until they play, but as we discussed last time, and the one thing that I think is still the big thing is whether they've decided they've got new material, or whether it's just going to be the stuff from the original from the first phase, which is also fine. You can make the argument either way, but it sounds like given the demand, there a lot of people are there to hear the big hits anyway. So
absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, we could probably talk about this forever, but
We can
we've got
turn
other
this into
things
an
now.
exclusive Oasis podcast now.
That's right. But we have other things we need to do. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll be covering this topic at some point in the next 12 months or so. Probably might even do after we've seen them next year. Fingers crossed the brothers can hold it together for that long. We might even have some sort of reminiscing of the the actual event itself. So unless you've got anything you wanted to add there, Stuart, I think we'll give that a wrap.
Yeah, no, all good. I did just quickly. I did re-listen to the final album, which I know you're more of a fan on than I was, and
Yep.
I got to say I think the first 6 or 7 tracks, "Dig Out Your Soul," is that what it's called?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the first 6 or 7 tracks are just really, really good. It sort of peters out the last 3 or 4, but there's enough gold in there to go. Oh well, I can see where both of them were taking their various directions. Post Oasis. So be nice to hear 1 or 2 tracks from that album.
Yeah, you're right. I really do like that first half of that album. I really liked that sound and that direction they were going with it. It was something a little bit different, but interesting and entertaining at the same time.
Mm.
So yeah, if they do come up with, I have heard Noel say that first Flying Birds album was essentially the next Oasis album, which would have been very interesting to hear with
Yeah.
Liam on vocals. I know there's been some AI things done
Yeah.
around that, so yeah, it'd be interesting if they do end up coming up with some new material, whether it's going to be of that ilk or whether it's back to the
Classic
90s
sound.
stadium
Yeah.
sound that they were going with.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. That was a nice, short and sweet one. And as we said, we'll definitely be covering Oasis over the next 12 months as things heat up towards that, I guess, the UK tour and the rest of the world tour that they are doing.
Absolutely.
So, got to keep them separated.
Indeed. Till next time, mate.
Don't look back in anger.
See ya.
Right. Hello, welcome to the Rankers. I'm Kyle. Right, and with me is Stuart McPhee. How are you tonight, Stuart?
All right, you son of a bitch. I'm great.
That's fantastic. Now, before we start our episode here, which we are looking at our top 5 grand final moments, given that the footy codes have just wrapped up and we're heading into cricket season. Little disclaimer: if we sound a little bit tired as we're going through our topics, it's not because it's late at night, although that might be part of it. It's because we have listened to this and said this before on Sunday night when unfortunately I forgot to press record. We spent an hour talking about our grand final moments and then realized that we had no evidence of that. So please forgive us if we sound a little bit tired talking about that, but we'll try and make it as spontaneous as we can. Stuart, are you ready to go?
I am. I've picked 5 completely new moments. So
lovely.
On its toes. No, still the same. But it's interesting to have a different new sort of segue to start the. I think it's a little bit different in the to set the scene. Kyle has chosen his top 5 favorite NRL grand final moments, and I've chosen 5 AFL. So we sort of stick to what we know, and then we've got a nice potpourri of selections there. But I think the off season is a little bit different for NRL and AFL, and this is a topic that I didn't get to mention last time because from memory, you guys NRL sort of getting into the representative season where I think there's a
Pacific
Championships, yep. Where in the AFL at the moment, there's been this. It's 8 days. It felt like it's been 8 months of trade week, which bless their cotton socks. They try and replicate what happens in America because that's what the AFL does so much. But in the end, everything sort of comes down to the last 45 minutes, and you sort of get to the end, like it finished at 7:30 today, and you go, "This could have been 2 days, gents. What are we doing here?" People arguing the toss over. Well, if you get a future 3rd round pick for this guy, we need something back. And Yeah, it's all very, very silly stuff. But it feels like it extends the AFL season so much that it starts to suffocate anything else in October, November.
Mm. I do think it is the one thing that NRL is well and truly above the AFL in, and that is the representative season,
Mm,
given that
yeah,
AFL really doesn't have one.
no,
Apart from, I think there's an All Australian that gets named if
there's
there was an Australian
yeah,
team.
there's an All Australian team. Yep,
Yeah, and they used to play Ireland in a mix of Gaelic football or something like that, but
yep, correct.
I
Yep,
don't think they do that anymore.
yep,
Um, talking about the trade system, to me, unlike the American system, which tends to be quite even between team-based trades or player demanded trades or player requested trades,
mm.
AFL tends to be heavily for trade. And this is just what I've seen through the media because I
Yep.
don't follow AFL that closely. It tends to be player driven. Would that be correct?
As in players want out and to.
Players want out rather than teams necessarily saying, "I'm shipping you off to get this player in."
Yeah, and I think because the way contracts are done, it's a little bit different to just say sport that's close to or a league that's close to our hearts, which is the NBA, where it is usually more team driven. The what you'll see these days, and I think this is because of the player empowerment movement that's still at the front and center of AFL. It is more player led. There will be some players that will get moved. I wouldn't say against their will, but they're likely to be players that are starved of opportunities anyway. And I think you hardly ever hear with an NBA player, I'm homesick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless they're from a foreign country.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's sort of part and parcel. As if you're an NBA player, you're on the road anyway, so don't even worry about the fact that you're not in your home state or home city. You're in your own team city because you're on the road so much.
Yep.
So there is a lot more of of players wanting to move back to their own state here because of homesickness,
Mm-hmm.
which this is the era of that, as I said, the player empowerment movement, and it will change. It ebbs and flows. It's ebbed and flowed in any other professional sport in terms of the teams have more control, or the league has more control now. It's the players, and so yeah, it is. That's just where we're at. It's the nature of the beast, which makes trading, sometimes quite difficult to get to the outcome.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you covered on the draft there, but the draft is something that the NRL really needs to introduce.
Yeah,
Because the idea of the salary cap was to spread the talent amongst the teams.
yeah,
Yet, I think in the last it might be 10 years now, it's either been Roosters, Storm, or Panthers winning the premiership.
yep.
And a lot of those teams have finished, with the minor premiership as well, where I think there's a little bit more,
Evenness or
movement or evenness, sorry, amongst those AFL premiers.
yeah, yeah,
So
and
so a salary cap really doesn't work without a draft allowing that bottom team to have the best or what should be the best option
yes,
of the young talent coming through. Even if it's a free agent draft where players that aren't signed for the next year, they go into the draft and the bottom place team gets first pick or gets the right to trade their pick and all that sort of thing. So I think it is something that the NRL definitely needs to look at.
yeah, and good work on getting us back on track talking about grand finals and premierships. But it is a good point. I think the draft is designed, to have that sort of evenness in the competition as best as possible. There will always be outliers with that who are either they've just got a great system, and they know how to trade well and they know how to get uh, the best out of players. And Geelong and Sydney are two great examples of that. And then you'll have teams that will languish so down the bottom so long. And then you get mediocre teams like my own, who seem to just not get it right. So in the end, the league can only set these up as best as possible. You then just need a lot of things go your way. Health, great support, great fitness coaches, high performance coaches. Everything to go well to win a premiership.
That's right.
Yep.
All right, so we did talk about our how we experienced the grand final. So why don't you kick us off there with your thoughts on the AFL grand final day?
So AFL grand final, for those of you on the other side of the Ron Barassi line, which divides rugby league and Aussie rules, despite the fact that it was a Brisbane team that won the premiership this year. AFL grand finals ordinarily about 2:30 start. It's always at the MCG. A couple of twists and turns aside, the COVID years when the MCG was being refurbished, and so it is very much a day event, and it is going over to someone's place who's holding a grand final barbecue. That's the lunchtime. Halftime, if you're not interested in whatever entertainment's on, it's get to the local park to kick the footy or do in the backyard and climb the fence to pick up the ball when someone boots it too far.
It out.
Yeah, correct. And certainly there is this continued soft push by the league and I think the broadcasters to move it to a nighttime event.
Do you think it'll happen?
Unfortunately. There's very few traditions that I'm not an originalist. I'm not one to hold up the founding fathers' rules of the game and say it must be played like this. But a daytime grand final is one of them. But it will inevitably change.
Yeah, and it's interesting that may happen because there's a massive push, particularly by fans at the moment, to have the NRL grand final, which is actually played at night. I think it's 7:30 kickoff Sydney time, to have that brought back to the afternoon, even if it's a 3:30, 4 o'clock time slot.
Yeah.
Even though the next day is a public holiday, it's the kids are the future of the game, and a lot of them can't be watching that late at night, or they're ready for bed, all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting how the two leagues are going about it. The AFL's always had that, I'm assuming has always had that afternoon grand final, COVID aside, and now probably will be pushed into that evening time slot by the money.
Yes.
Whereas the NRL, fans want it to go the other way, but I don't know it'll change while they still sell out and there's high ratings and all that sort of thing. So I don't think it'll change too much.
No.
Not in the near future, anyway.
No, things will stay the same. Penrith will still keep winning premierships in the NRL.
No. Actually, my favorite I'll get my favorite AFL grand final moment out the way, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the football. It was when the Killers were the entertainment. I think that was 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago. Yep. I remember watching their pre-match, and then I think they then did a set post-match.
Yes.
It might have been the infamous moment where Dusty, I think was his name, got up on the stage and danced with the Killers or something like that. So, and then Kiss last year at the final was pretty good as well. Didn't care too much for Katy Perry this year, but it is one thing I think that the AFL gets mostly right. Was it Meatloaf at the AFL grand final? So there has been some dropped balls occasionally, or kicked behinds, I should say, on the entertainment front. Generally better than the NRL. I know they've been chasing AC/DC for a long time, so I'm not sure if that'll ever occur. But it's very rare that the NRL entertainment trumps the AFL entertainment. Not that really matters in the end of things, because no one really remembers the entertainment once the game's been played anyway. So
no, and there was a 2 or 3 year period where I think around when because Killers was one of them, where they went for that post grand final. Let's do a mini concert on the ground, and fans can stay and the plays may be presented. Because I recall right before all the COVID stuff hit, the women's one day cricket World Cup, Katy Perry played at the end as well, and I think it was sort of inspired by what the Killers did with the AFL Grand Final. I think it was Sophie Molyneux was up there dancing with Katy Perry, and it was like, okay, this is the compromise instead of having a 7:30 game, because the problem is you got the entertainment and much like State of Origin these days, it doesn't start until 8:30, and you go, what are we doing here? So that felt like it was the compromise, because by the time the grand final was over, it was night time. You could do the theatrics, but I don't know whether the negotiations with the performing talent, particularly with post COVID, whether that didn't work, or maybe they thought there was no interest in it. But to me, that seemed like the most entertaining thing, similar to a lot of the V8s supercars, where they'll have a gig after the race.
Cold chisel play afterwards.
Yeah, correct. That's that sort of thing. I know they do that particularly in Adelaide, and I think Gold Coast as well, with the supercars there. So what are we talking about? Motorsports. Let's get back to football. So funny you mentioned it. So not my favourite, but my first ever memory of rugby league, because the only time I think I was ever exposed to the idea that rugby league was a sport before I moved to Queensland was, I think it was the Australian edition of Mad Magazine mentioned Mel Meninga. And I thought, is this a football player I'm unaware of that plays for Sydney or something like that? And and then it wasn't long after that, in fact, it was probably about a month before we moved to Queensland, we watched the grand final that year. Channel 10 down in Victoria was showing it. And I want to say it was Penrith v Canberra, probably. I'm talking early 90s. They probably...
possibly. Could have been 92 or something like that.
Yeah.
91, 91, sorry.
Yeah,
Broncos won in 92, yep.
Yeah, it was either 90 or 91, because I keep forgetting which year we moved up to Queensland. But, so it was certainly early 90s, and that was my first time seeing a rugby league game, was the grand final that year. So there you go, back when it was the New South Wales Rugby League.
Yeah, NSWRL, yes.
Yes.
All right, well, let's forego the pre-match entertainment, which we've just provided, and move into our main game, which is our top 5 moments. And we'll let you go first, Stuart, given that the AFL is generally the first grand final played, usually on the same weekend, although this year AFL the weekend before NRL.
Yes, so mine goes back to 1993, and it's the only time my beloved Essendon team will make the top 5. Now, we won that year. We also won in 2000, but that was such a dominant year that was, apart from Essendon winning, there was no real excitement in that. But in 93, whilst we did win convincingly against Carlton, we saw what I believe is the most inconsequential grand final moment that is still the most talked about. And that was Michael Long's goal in, I believe, the second quarter, where he gets it from the half-back line and runs on the wing. It takes about 2 or 3 bounces. I think it's when he takes his 4th bounce, he may have run a step too far. Hard to say. Then from, I want to say, about 40 metres out, he drills it through the goal. Now, what is the most controversial bit is that the person that was named fullback of the century, Stephen Silvani, was, and Joe Bailey, his husband, for all you Sale of the Century heads out there, was effectively on the goal line and leaps into the air, claims he touches it. The goal umpire's right there in front of him, not caring about what Silvani is pleading to him one iota, signals for a goal. And then you see Stu Silvani's head in his hands in despair and almost incredulous that it's been given a goal. Now, as I said, Essendon won comfortably. Whether it was going to be called a goal or a point does not change the outcome. But you'll have many a supporter for either Essendon or Carlton claiming that either it was a goal or it was touched on the line. Now, if we had the goal line technology that we do today, and HD cameras, unlike the videotape quality that we had in the early '90s, maybe we would come up with a definitive answer to it all. But it is in the for the guy that won the Norm Smith Medal, which is the best player on the ground for the grand final. Being an Indigenous man in the year of the Indigenous person in 1993, it was a nice capstone to what was also classed as one of the greatest seasons of all time, not just in terms of who won the grand final, for all the things that happened in the '93 season in the AFL. I couldn't think of a better way to end it. So I'm thankful that the technology didn't exist, and we can all agree that it was absolutely a goal.
Absolutely. I think the great thing about grand finals is not necessarily the winning moments,
Mm.
but and like you said earlier on, not a moment that stands out as a victory or anything like that, but just a moment that's often talked about. And I think and while you might not support either team, there'll be a moment that just lives in your mind forever. And
Mm.
I think you've encapsulated that really well. For us non AFL followers, you mentioned something about an extra step. So
Yeah.
when a player's running with the ball, is there a certain amount of steps before they have to bounce
Yeah,
it
well,
or
it's a certain amount,
dribble it?
certain
Whatever they
amount of
call it.
meters, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. I think it's something like 15 every 10 to 15 meters. You have to bounce the ball, or else it's called going too far, or essentially holding the ball. Um, and yeah, so the if you ever see it on YouTube, he sort of uh, pivots a little bit, and I think that stops his motion, which then may help him in terms of whether he has gone too far or not.
Distance, yeah.
So it probably it upset his rhythm of bouncing, because I believe he looked up and he saw someone straight in his view, and that's why he does a little shimmy to the right, and that's where there's people that go, well, it shouldn't have even been a goal in the first place because he'd run too far. I think he's probably okay.
So in soccer, we have Maradona's hand of God, where he swears endlessly that he didn't touch it,
Yeah,
whereas this is the reverse, that he swears he did touch
that's
it.
correct. Yes.
He, okay, so
Yep. So it's the
okay.
hand of Sauce, because he was called Sauce, which was son of Serge. Serge Silvani was his old man who played for Carlton before Steve, obviously. Hand of Sauce, we'll call it.
Very good. All right. I've bookended my top five with individual moments. So my fifth moment, which I'm about to give out, is an individual moment. And the first one, which I really don't want to talk about, but is also an individual moment. The rest are, although individual moments, they're more like the toughness of NRL and the ability to get through the game. I'll get to that as we get in. But my number five, I when we were talking about doing this episode, we originally were thinking of the best grand finals. Unfortunately, in my code, it's generally thought that the team that I support is involved in the two best grand finals of all time, and unfortunately for me and many other Brisbane Broncos fans, we lost those grand finals, and weren't big losses either. They were tight ones, so I think those hurt even more. So I had to slip my team in there, like you've done for your fifth moment. So then I can clear the air a little bit and use my brain a little bit more for the remaining four moments. So I've gone with Steve Renouf in the 1992 grand final up against St George. So Broncos entered the comp in 1988. First team out, if my memory is correct, first team out of the New South Wales region, because I think Canberra was in beforehand, even though technically not part of New South Wales. Wait, it's in New South Wales. And 5 years, and they made the final. I think this was the year they finished first and made their way through to the grand final. It's about early to midway into the second half. played the ball. It's gone out to Alfie, who's then passed on to Kevin Walters, who's put on a long pass to Steve Renouf out, standing out wide, who was more than anything known for his speed. And this is demonstrated in this moment. For those of you that know it, it's probably running through your head right now. Manages to jink around a few players, which he did on quite a regular basis, and then just goes. And then I think kind of wrong foots himself towards the, if I'm remembering it correctly, towards the try line, and manages to fall over the try line. And I think that was the moment that kind of, if not sealing the grand final, it was the one that gave them the belief that they were going to win the grand final that day. Again, one of the moments that's regularly played leading up to grand final days or final nights or whatever, as part of the highlights package. And probably what put our club, being a non-New South Wales club, the first one to enter the, at the time, New South Wales Rugby League, which is now the NRL, put us on the map. And that's why I think that moment is very important, although probably not the top 5 grand final moments, but who cares? I'm going to put it in there anyway. So yeah, I've got Steve Renouf in the 1992 grand final with the 95-metre try to pretty much seal the game for the Broncos against the Dragons.
Lovely. And Renouf, the Pearl, was that his nickname?
Yeah, the Pearl. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
And both great Indigenous players for our top 5s as well.
Absolutely.
Very good. My number 4 is only from last year's. It's the 2023 grand final, played between Collingwood and Brisbane, of which Collingwood won. It's been described as the best modern day grand final, and I guess that all depends on what you sort of class as modern. Now look,
and which team you support.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, and so when the VFL turned into the AFL, which was in 1990, I think that's probably a nice sort of watershed moment in terms of thinking about the modern era, because that's when most of the teams that are in the comp had formed and had then entered, and so probably my favourite, I think the best grand final outside of that is the year before it, which is the 89 grand final between Geelong and Hawthorn, of which Ablett kicked about 8 or 9 in a losing grand final. But last year's was an absolute cracker. I think it was 4 points in the end. And with about 90 seconds to go, and grand finals are all about moments, and there was a free kick awarded to Lachie Neale for Brisbane, and the umpire played play on advantage, and you could argue whether there really was an advantage. It's sort of incumbent on the team that's got the ball that's been called advantage, whether they're making the movement to keep going forward. And I understand when all was on the line with about 90 seconds to go, you've got that rush of blood. What they probably should have done, because they end up just hacking the ball into the forward line and it end up rebounding out, was probably to take a second or two and regather and give it back to Lachie Neale. But it's a game of milliseconds sometimes, and you see that with injuries and tackles and suspensions. People need to make decisions in a snap moment, and yes, it's you couldn't begrudge someone for wanting to keep on surging forward, but it was the last sort of play that could have changed the game entirely. Collingwood go on to win it, but what was even more special was sort of the fairy tale of the coach Craig McRae having his partner give birth to their daughter that morning on grand final day, and I believe he kept it from the team until they were all in the rooms together after they won. They, being the Magpies, he ended up calling his daughter Maggie, which was quite nice. And yeah, so for most of if you're not a fan of Collingwood, they're the team that you hate. I guess it's sort of maybe St George is that. Is it St George would be that or Manly? Probably Manly.
I think there's not really anymore a universal team that everyone hates.
Yep,
I think each supporter base
has
has a
their own
different
rivalries.
team that they hate, but I guess it's levels of hate.
Yep.
Once you get to a grand final, which teams are involved, which one do you hate the least?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
guess is the one you go for. But
Yeah.
I have heard that if you're not a Collingwood supporter, you generally hate Collingwood. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and so they got awfully close to making me begrudgingly care for them. And it didn't help that Craig McRae's a likable guy as coach. It just doesn't usually sit well. It doesn't sit well me having a them make the number 4 slot. But here we are. It was a great grand final.
okay, so I'm assuming last year being Brisbane versus Collingwood,
Mm.
that if you weren't a Collingwood fan, you were essentially going for Brisbane. Would that be
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, and it was
Is
same this.
Brisbane, are they hated that much within
No,
the
and
AFL
no,
world?
I don't think so. I think of all the non-Victorian expansion teams, they're probably the one that has the most love in Melbourne, and that's probably for two reasons. For their first decade of their existence, when they were the Bears, they were the Bad News Bears.
They were the current Suns. Would that be
No, I'll probably no worse than that.
worse than that?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so I think they ate
And
shit
they
for
weren't
for a
Sydney?
while. Sorry,
And they weren't Sydney,
and they weren't
so
Sydney, yeah. But also when Fitzroy essentially folded and merged with Brisbane Bears to become the Brisbane Lions, there's still a huge supporter base of Fitzroy fans down here. Um, and so I think that is why. So yeah, when it came to this year for Brisbane and Sydney in the
well,
grand
that was going to
final,
be my next question.
yeah.
Where would the allegiances have lied there?
Well, the fact that Victoria and Queensland, I think, have always teamed up to rag on New South Wales,
Definitely.
and I think we spoke about this in the State of Origin episode. Yeah, so it's very much a team up against Sydney wherever possible.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Excellent. My moment number 4 for me is Cooper Cronk in the 2018 grand final. So, for those that don't know, Cooper Cronk came through Queensland Junior Rugby League. Was picked up by the Melbourne Storm after pretty much being not neglected, but not picked up by Queensland-based teams or any other based teams, I guess. Uh, Mostly playing as an outside back, so a centre, maybe even a winger at some stages. And I got signed up by Melbourne, and Craig Bellamy, one of the best coaches of all time, turned him into a halfback. Now, for those that don't follow NRL, a halfback is sort of essentially your quarterback of the team. It's the person that essentially is the driver, the coaches, I guess, a vessel out on the field, making sure that the game plan is enacted. So generally, halfbacks aren't made; they're molded, if that makes any sense. So they
Mm.
have the talent, and then the finishing touches are put on them by the coaches. Cooper Cronk's the exception to the rule here, and was made a halfback by Bellamy, and turns out to be quite a decent halfback at that, winning I think 3 or 4 premierships, most of those with Melbourne. State of origins galore, and even played halfback for Australia. So, I mean, mug of the game if you can reach those levels. But what makes Cooper Cronk's effort in the 2018 grand final all that more special is the fact that he did it pretty much with one arm. So essentially, he's gone into the game. Can't remember exactly the shoulder injury he had, but quite a serious one. And rugby league is not the kind of game where you can generally get away with that sort of injury, which is why it makes it into my top 5, given that you have to tackle. It's not like NFL where you have an offense and a defensive team, and the offensive players don't do the defense, and the defensive players don't have to worry about the offense. You have to do it all in rugby league, and so he's out there marshalling the team around. The fact that him and Trent Robinson, the coach, were able to come up with a game plan where he still has an impact on the offensive side of the game, but is kind of then hidden away, I guess, to a certain extent on the defensive side of the game to get through that game, and to top it all off, to do it against his former team as well, the Melbourne Storm, to do it against the coach that turned him into that great halfback. So yeah, my number 4 moment there is Cooper Cronk in the 2018 grand final.
Yeah, no, amazing, and it's one of those ones. You take a gamble, taking a guy into the grand final that is injured. You've seen it spectacularly blow up against in AFL grand finals. Sometimes it's the real motivator. Other times it will have you one short and you will be exposed, and they'll target you. So it takes a genius game plan, as you've outlined, in order to get them through, because someone of Cooper Cronk's leadership and just high IQ is it's invaluable for a team, and you'd be lesser without him. So no, good pick there.
All right, your number 3.
My number 3 is the second of the 2 COVID grand finals played at Optus Stadium in Perth. So it was a nighttime grand final, or probably late-ish afternoon from a time zone point of view. So this was the Melbourne Western Bulldogs grand final in 2021. And it was a bit of a seesawing affair in the first half, the first 2 quarters, and then it was sort of even money at halftime. The third quarter, the Bulldogs came out and kicked the first 2, and that took them to 19 points up. And then I saw something that you very rarely get to see, which is a team basically put the foot on the gas and just come out with an absolute blitz of a 15-minute flurry of goals. And so what happened was, with the Bulldogs 19 points up, Melbourne then piled on the next 7 goals in 15 minutes to take would have been about a 24-point lead or so. And then in the fourth quarter, I think it was 9 goals to 2 or something like that, and they absolutely killed it. It was essentially over by 3/4 time, because even though the job wasn't done, they had so much momentum in that final 15 minutes. It was like seeing Torval and Dean on ice. It was phenomenal. A team at the top of their game, where it was almost like they were in blackout mode, what was happening. And the Bulldogs just had no answers for it. So yeah, the 15-minute flurry in the third quarter by Melbourne was just an absolute sight to behold, and I'm pretty sure Melbourne supporters probably still dial that up on YouTube just to watch it, probably with a nice glass of red.
Nice, very good. All right, my number 3 moment from our NRL Grand Final moment. We're going back to 2003. A Penrith moment. I know they're the flavour of the decade, given that they've just completed their 4th premiership in a row and 5th grand final in a row. I think that's now every year of this decade they've been involved in the grand final. So go back to before that. I think their last premiership before that, which was 2003, and we're going with the Scott Sattler tackle. So Scott Sattler is the son of John Sattler, who was a Rabbitohs legend and maybe an immortal. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Anyway, didn't reach the heights that his dad did, but given that he's from the TV generation, gets to live on in infamy,
Yep.
or I guess famously, because of that. So, for again, those not familiar too much with NRL, you have your forwards and you have your backs. So your forwards are generally your grunt men. They're doing most of the tackling and most of the hit ups and those sorts of things. And your backs are the ones that chime into the back line. They generally have the speed and the pace and the ball playing ability and all that sort of thing. So Sattler is a forward, I think a second row forward or maybe even a lock forward for this game. And he finds himself on grand final day, close match. Not being a fan of either team, not exactly sure of what the scores were at the time, but I seem to remember it being close at the time. He's chased down the Sydney Roosters winger or centre, outside back anyway, close to the sideline, and had no right to do that as a second row forward. Chased him down, just that, I guess, that grand final adrenaline where you can sort of go above and beyond what your normal abilities and your normal limits are. And he's managed to chase down an outside back, tackle him close to the sideline, and managed to take him out of touch. And pretty much, I guess, and we talked earlier about how maybe the winning moment is not necessarily the moment that's always remembered in a grand final, but those moments that led to the ability to have the winning moment. And this was definitely one of those. And probably something what which is a bit different to AFL, where AFL kind of has the more aerobic players. So there's not, apart from height, there's not really a size difference as such. And correct me if I'm wrong here with the AFL, whereas in the NRL, your forwards are generally bigger, way more. So therefore, the speed isn't quite there as what would be in the outside back. So to be able to go to those efforts and those lengths to chase down an outside back in such a crucial time of the game definitely deserves consideration for a top five, and it's made my top five of grand final moments.
Excellent, like a lion chasing down an impala.
Exactly.
Nice one.
All right, what are we up to? Your number two?
My number two. So this was the 2018 grand final. I was in Germany, and even though my team wasn't playing, I felt the desire to have something Australian in front of me. So at a very early hour of the morning, I think it was about 5:30, 6 o'clock, I dial up. I think it's some sort of special AFL access, but you have to pay a pretty penny to get it. It's like NBA League Pass, but with dynamic pricing. To bring it back to Oasis, which is another pod entirely, not this one. So I'm there in bed, bleary eyed, watching it, and it was a really tight tussle, like quite a lot of the good grand finals are, but it's probably the first time that I appreciated the advancement in camera technology. So it all comes down to you ask anyone in the 2018 grand final, what do you remember? It's Dom Sheed's clutch goal. So whilst there are small moments within the game, this is the thing that did it, which was kick a goal with, I think, about 50 seconds left on the clock. It was from the sideline, a very tight angle, and the spider cam was right behind him, and you just had the most beautiful view. It was like seeing an EA Sports video game version of it, where they would have those camera angles that normal real life we didn't have back when they could do all this fun stuff. But now that we've got it, it brings these great moments to life. And the only ding on it is that it makes it less miraculous because you don't have the normal angle where you would go, how the hell has he kicked it from this? And so being right behind him, you sort of see the goals open up a little bit more. But to do it to get your team in front with 50 seconds to go was phenomenal. And I'm not quite sure if it was the spider cam then on on the coaches' boxes right when the siren went. You saw the Collingwood coach with his head in his hands, and this scene of jubilation in the coaches' box for West Coast. That also made me realise, okay, we can do this now with big moments in sport, and not have to rely on, to go back to my number 5, videotape footage of something which has been looked at more than the Zapruder film on with the Kennedy assassination of what actually happened here. So yeah, and it was an absolute great clutch goal by Dom Sheed to see West Coast beat Collingwood in 2018. So that's my number 2.
Yeah, I think you mentioned on our rehearsal recording on Sunday about the spider cam actually being behind the player at the time of the goal. Is that right?
Yeah. Have you gone back and seen that, or no?
No.
Yeah,
no, I will.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm sure you will. Yeah, it's AFL. Yeah, from memory, it's behind him, so you get this beautiful shot of the goals and him then kicking with the ball sailing straight through the middle. So it did really bring to life the feel of being not where in his shoes, but right behind him and seeing it firsthand. So which has made it even better.
Yeah, considering that the spider cam has come a long way, where it was initially just put in so Mark Taylor could run a slips lesson during the lunch break of a cricket game, and it actually transformed a lot of sport. Anyway,
it's better than a cameraman on a Segway.
or Ian Healy on one.
Yeah.
All right. Move on to my number 2 moment, which takes us back to the 2014 grand final. So we're looking 10 years ago. And we had the Rabbitohs against the Bulldogs.
Mm-hmm.
And from memory, the Bulldogs came from 8th to make the grand final, up against the Rabbitohs, who were a very strong team that year. And Michael Maguire was the coach, fingers crossed, who is now the new Brisbane Broncos coach. He can do similar things for us next year. But that's not what the moment is. The moment is it's a Sam Burgess moment. So for those that don't know, Sam Burgess was an English international who played a little bit over in the UK, but then spent most of his career over here in the NRL. I think he had 3 brothers as well who also played. They might have all been in the squad at the same time at some point as well. Anyway, what's so great about this moment, and it will never happen again, especially with the concussion laws, is that Sam Burgess is part of the kickoff by the Bulldogs, and Sam Burgess is part of that first big hit up of the game, which is sometimes some of the most exciting stuff that happens in the game. Anyway, he's taken it up and has been tackled by a fellow English international in James Graham, and he's copped a little bit of a shoulder from James Graham to the jaw and actually broken his jaw in the first tackle of the game. So we're looking 15 seconds into the game, and I think he won the Clive Churchill medal, which is best player on ground, for his play in the game. It was an inspired game from him. But as I said, wouldn't happen these days because he'd be off with a concussion protocol, and very unlikely to return to the game, particularly with a broken jaw. And for it to happen in the first tackle of the game and to last 80 minutes with a broken jaw, that's toughness personified. So I give my number 2 grand final moment to Sam Burgess.
Yeah, no, very good. And am I right in thinking he already he was announced that he was going to finish up and go back to England anyway? Or did he end up
played on for a few more years?
Did he?
Okay. I think he finished in Australia.
Yeah.
James Graham did return to the UK. I think he'd played in 5 grand finals and lost them all, and then returned to St Helens and won a grand final.
Yeah, right.
And then retired. But no, I don't think Sam Burgess returned to the UK to play. He is over there coaching one of the teams now, however.
Okay. Yeah, just absolute madness. It's one thing to go into a game injured, but then to to have that injury happen pretty much at the start in the I believe it's the '88 grand final where I think it's I don't think it's Dermo. I think it's Dipieta Medico, Rocket Dipieta Medico, but essentially played with a punctured lung for most of the game. Just that madness, these people, absolute madness.
Oh, look, there's probably stories littered throughout the 120 odd years of NRL, but that one stuck out in my mind
Yeah,
for our list anyway. So
absolutely. So my number one is something that has only happened 3 times in the history of VFL AFL Grand Finals, and will never happen again because they changed the rules after it. And that is to witness a drawn grand final. So the third and final time this ever happened was in 2010. Collingwood,
yeah, and when we were doing our rehearsal on Sunday, it
yes,
surprised me that it was that long ago. It to me, the memory of that seems like it was only 5 or 6 years ago.
yeah,
So for it to have been 14 years ago, yeah, that just stuck out to me when you mentioned that.
there's a pretty good theory, and I have to remember who came up with it. It sounds like something that Chuck Klosterman would have done around why we don't perceive things that happened in the early 21st century as things that happened 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because you sort of think about, a really good example is the fact that Oasis, it's been 15 years, has it?
Correct.
Yeah, but that doesn't feel like 15 years. Where if you think about, and I think it was almost about 15 years, maybe it was 14 years. So the time that say Cold Chisel first packed it in 83, 84 to when they reformed in 97, 98, that felt like a lifetime. Because, and maybe it's because of our age, but the advancement of technology and how things were so different, where, we think about 2010, there's no discernible difference apart from, like there was Twitter then, there was Facebook then. There may not have been TikToks, but there's no, doesn't feel like a great difference. But between 84 and 97, that's feels like a generational change. Anyway, I've gone off track, but it is a reason why you go, well, actually 2010, that's 14 years ago. That makes no sense, but here we are. So the once again, Collingwood against St Kilda, who had only won one premiership and still don't. Spoiler alert, they didn't win the replay of the grand final. 66 was their one and only win, which I think was actually against Collingwood by 1 point. But the 2010 grand final was one of the most tense matches I've ever watched, and just got tenser and tenser as the game wore on. And then with about 2 or 3 minutes to go, when things were even, you were going, like you sort of knew beforehand, but didn't want to believe it, that there's not going to be a result here. This is going to be a draw. And not sort of really understanding that what all that means. And you could see it in the players' faces right at the end when the siren went, and poetically it finished pretty much on the centre wing, where it was in no man's land, and everyone went from this. It was almost like the 5 stages of what the hell's going on, which was, I can relax because the siren's gone. Hang on, we didn't win. Hang on, we didn't lose. Fuck, we have to come back next week and do the whole thing again. And it must have been an absolute scramble for the league to go, we need new entertainment, we need this, we need that. And I think a lot of it was done in a more subdued sort of way. You didn't have to have all the pomp and ceremony.
Did they do like another grand final parade, a grand final breakfast,
I don't
they just
believe
rock
so.
up and play?
Yeah, no, I don't think they did the grand final parade. I don't think they did another grand final breakfast. I think they may have had potentially just someone do the national anthem. Yeah.
One of the players.
but it was I and from memory, and someone who's more of a Collingwood or St Kilda fan would know more, because the problem was the replay was a bit of a non-event. Collingwood just seemed better prepared, and they wiped the floor with St Kilda. But from memory, because the grand final is usually corporate tickets, and if you're an actual fan, it's very hard to get a ticket. I believe there were more tickets on sale for the actual fans, because um, you know people weren't prepared to go, hey, in 5 days' time, I've got a corporate package ready for you. So I think it was more of a, not open the gates to everyone, but it was more availability for fans to get a seat. But yeah, from memory, it was a lot more sort of stripped down in terms of the whole ceremony.
Well, it's hard to recreate that anticipation, isn't it? When the game's already essentially being played,
Yeah,
and you all got to like, oh, okay, we've got to come back. And yeah,
yeah,
I know as a fan it would feel really weird. It's like, oh well, I've gone through all the emotions already. Now I've got to kind of pick myself up and go again. So
yeah. So my understanding is that it now follows what happens in other finals, and for I think the last time they had a drawn final was maybe sometime in the 90s. And then from then they'd already made the decision that we're not going to replay finals, because that then pushes everything else out. So it just goes with the extra time, and I think it's maybe 5 or 10 minutes each way, and then hopefully that there's an outcome after that. I don't think the patience has been tested yet in terms of, oh, shit, it's still a draw. What do we do now?
yeah, I like that because that would, I think you need a result on grand final day.
You do.
I don't like in the NRL the golden point during regular season. I think if you've played 80 minutes and you can't separate a team, you
Yep,
deserve to
that's
stick
on
with
that's on
points.
you both. Yep, yep,
Yeah, but come grand final day, you need to walk out a winner or a loser,
yeah,
not a draw. It just feels so flat.
yep, yeah. Agreed. And it was funny. I went to a drawn game this year. I think it was 3 or 4 drawn games during the season, which is not unusually high, but it's at the higher end. There was a lot of close games this year, but I went to the Anzac Day game, which was a draw, in front of 92,000 people. And I guess that's the closest closest Essendon's gonna get to a grand final these days in terms of the size of the crowd. But to have that many people there and not have a result, it was the only time that I had sort of for half a second thought maybe we should do extra time in regular games, and then I realised no, no, no. If they can't get a result, that's on them. You split the
Absolutely.
points and move on.
And as a tennis fan, I lament that there's
The
no
the,
longer those
the fifth set
long
tie breaks.
fifths. No, well, the fifth set
Yeah,
keeps going until you get a 2 game margin.
yeah,
The because you'll never have stories of like what was it, a Mahout and someone else who went something like 50-48 at Wimbledon or something like that. Like
yeah,
that won't ever happen again, and it's a shame because I think it was a really great part of tennis. But I guess that's a topic for another podcast.
yeah. Well, there's certainly nothing better than watching, being in Australia with the Oz Open and still being awake at 3 o'clock watching Andy Roddick and someone else have a crack.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Just serve after ace after ace.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on to my number one moment.
Yes,
And
bring it home.
unfortunately, coming up with my list, this had to be number one. I was in the fetal position. Should I put this in? Should I put this in? I decided to put this in. So
Can I
long.
can I guess? And this isn't because we've already done this, but I'm assuming it was Cowboys winning because you're a big North Queensland Cowboys fan.
No, I'm not
No.
touching the North Queensland Cowboys.
Okay.
Sorry to disappoint all those Cowboys fans listening. No, this goes back to last year, and it probably is etched in my brain as probably the best individual performance I've seen in a grand final. Most of all, because I was there, my first ever grand final. And so, long story short, Penrith going, they're 2 premierships, going for their third. They play pretty much perfect. They make one error for the game, for the whole entire game, and then you watch this year's grand final and they've made 4 before halftime. You're like, where was that last year? Anyway, they're up. They score off a Broncos error midway through the first half. Kick a penalty goal. They're up 8-0. Broncos score late in the first half, and Penrith go in at halftime 8-6 up. And then something happens in the first 15 minutes of the second half, and the Broncos just come to light. In particular, Ezra Mam, who scores a hat trick of tries in the space of about 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, the Broncos are up 20, I think it's 24 to 8. And the mood changes in the ground. So it's gone from pretty solid Penrith performance to, they might actually lose here. We had some Penrith fans in front of us, and they've gone from cheering to texting people on their phone. You get this real good vibe. My son turns to me and says, "Dad, I think we're going to win this." Mate, you don't say that. My mate's on the other side, and we're like, we just need one more, and I think we've got this. And then about the 60-minute mark, so 20 minutes to go, Nathan Cleary steps into gear, kicks a 40-20, to try assist for the first try to get back, and momentum just changes and swings on a dime. Broncos make 1 or 2 errors, which is all that needed to happen because Penrith just weren't making any. Stephen Crichton scores with about 12 minutes to go on the left-hand side. And it's just the belief starts coming back into the crowd. I sink a bit lower in my seat, and then who but Nathan Cleary scores with 3 minutes to go, jinking through the defensive line and diving over. Still not sure whether he might have had his arm under it. I don't know if the ball did touch the ground. It did. I'm joking. But yeah, so I don't think I've ever seen a player, particularly in a grand final, just grab the game by the scruff of the neck and go, "Nah, we're not losing today. This isn't happening to us," and just change the momentum of the game and he just knew that he was the man that could bring them back and win their, at the time, 3rd grand final in a row, which wouldn't have allowed them to get 4 in a row this year. So as hard as it is to say, it's Nathan Cleary as my number 1 from the 2023 grand final.
Yeah. Look, and I think we'll look back on this Penrith era as something to behold. You probably shouldn't have a team so dominant, but the thing is, as long as you make it, then, as you said, you've got the players that have got the belief to get them over the line, regardless of the circumstances. That's you can't buy that. That's a culture that you build and a team spirit that you build that is, it's just worth its weight in gold. So yeah, well deserved.
Makes it even worse that I've had to detail that twice in 4 days. But
I feel for you.
Things we do for things we do for our podcast.
Yep.
All right. So, do we have anything else that we need to add on NRL or AFL grand finals there, Stuart?
Look, don't think so. I think we've covered all our favourite moments. There's plenty out there that we haven't thought of for those that are fans of certain clubs that have done fairy tale runs or the like. But I think it's probably a good spread of things in the modern era in particular.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not sure that we've discussed what we're going to do for our next podcast, but it is November, and I think our theme for our November podcasts is mustaches. I know we've done sport. Did we do movies?
I think we may have had one on the board, and we may have missed it. Maybe it was music. All right. I'll have to go.
I'll look back through the archives, but it's either movies or music we haven't done. So might be time to do one of those perhaps.
Tash up. I like it.
Tash up. Yep. All right. Well, once again, thanks for listening, watching, however you are partaking in this content. If you are watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It all helps us. Also, love to hear your comments here. I'd love to see your comments. If you've got any comments, please put them up on YouTube, or you can get on our socials too, on Facebook, Instagram, and we're also on X, Twitter, whatever it's called these days, and TikTok, although we don't put too much up on there. Anything you'd like to finish with there, Stuart? Or
Yeah, we've got a TikTok channel.
we do.
Okay.
I think we got 3 TikToks on there. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
No, all good. Great to chat to you again about the same content again.
Hang on. Yes, I did press record this time. So
excellent. Football season is well and truly over. Let's bring on the cricket.
Yeah, I couldn't do this a third time. So, no. So yeah, cricket season. It's shaping up as an interesting summer, but that's probably for another podcast.
Indeed.
All right. Just remember, got to keep them separated.
Thanks, Carl.
All right.